When I went to bed last night, I fell asleep thinking, I'm going to take tomorrow off and not post any videos about Amberlynn's Q&As because what are the chances she's going to do a third day in a row? And then I woke up to realise that I had stupidly completely misunderestimated her because obviously she was going to do a third day in a row. And it's her longest one yet. Because when the breakdowns don't land and the devil horns don't distract, she doubles down. More questions, more dodging, more emotional whiplash. She's not stepping away from the circus, she's just stitching herself into the curtains. This isn't content, it's a hostage situation, and she's the villain and the captive. She said she was going on a break, but she's just on a constant broadcast. 66 questions today, and still zero self-awareness. It's not clarity, it's damage control at maximum volume. The tears are dry, and the contradictions are endless. She doesn't want peace, she wants the last word. And if she has to, she'll answer the same 66 questions 66 different ways just to get it. So settle in, because if Amber won't take a break from herself, then I'm not taking a break from breaking down her answers. And there it is, begin with praise bait. This isn't a Q&A, it's emotional Farmville. She plants the compliment, harvests adoration, and cries on cue to ensure it looks sincere. It's carefully curated vulnerability. The tears are emoji-based, not emotion-based. Because of course, receiving a compliment triggers a level of visible gratitude that somehow never appears when people are begging her to take accountability. Curious. But this is how she's setting the tone today. Start soft. Play the sweet, misunderstood girl who just wants to feel pretty. It neutralizes the critics before the real manipulation begins. Because we all know what comes next. Fake gratitude is always followed by real gaslighting. It's short, it's vague, and perfectly engineered for maximum projection with minimal effort. This is Amber's version of a baited hook. Say just enough to imply she's wounded, but not enough to take responsibility for why. She's not elaborating, she's not explaining. She might be heartbroken, but this isn't real. It's narrative armor. She's not devastated, she's strategically bruised. This is the feel sorry for me setup, and it's the first step in her all too familiar routine. Declare emotional devastation, absorb the sympathy, weaponize it later as proof she was trying to be vulnerable when the backlash comes. Heartbreak is real, but this is marketing. And this is just a classic narcissistic "they're obsessed with me" deflection. She doesn't even address the criticism, she pathologizes the critic. Zachary Michael isn't offering commentary, he's obsessed. Because in her mind, no one could possibly have a rational, analytical interest in her behaviour unless they're secretly enamoured. She thinks she's the celebrity under siege, but she's just the YouTube equivalent of a cautionary tale. We all know that he's not obsessed. He's documenting the ongoing absurdity that she uploads voluntarily. But she blocked him again. Not because he crossed a line, but because she can't control how he frames her. Narcissists despise mirrors they don't own. And when they can't discredit the reflection, they label it obsession. But commentary isn't obsession. But insisting that everyone who calls out your patterns is obsessed? That's just projection. Because Amberlynn doesn't respond to criticism. She declares war on visibility. The moment a reaction channel makes a good point, gets context or credibility, she rewrites the narrative. They're no longer critics, they're haters, bullies, abusers, and now ableists and obsessives. And then when the current reaction channel doesn't give her the chaos she's banking on, when they don't bite back or spiral for content, she just rotates the cast. She doesn't reflect, she reassigns blame. Accuse Mr. Snowflake of something dark. Next, Salty Crab's an ableist. Moving on, Zachary Michael's obsessed. She'll probably be dragging the narc alert back into the drama, or Karina or the ankle, because she's desperate for that drama. And we have to talk about that double standard. She's mocking creators for needing her for content, while feeding like a vampire on the reactions that they provoke to stay relevant. Because without these critics, there's no Amberlynn. She's not a victim. She's a parasite, and she's feeding off the ecosystem she pretends to hate. She doesn't want them to stop. She wants them to snap. Because if they lash out, she gets to cry. And if they don't, she just finds new targets until someone does. It's just a critic carousel where one target isn't enough. Because this isn't just reaction channel hate. It's a calculated cycle of provocation and persecution. She needs to believe that these reaction channels are haunted by her. They wake up thinking about her. Every video, every thought, every idle hour revolves around her content. But here's the difference. They clock out. They make a video, post it, engage, and then return to their lives. Jobs, pets, partners, groceries, dinner, laundry, joy, purpose. Meanwhile, Amber's just refreshing her Q&A responses, searching for her name, still stalking videos, reading comments, blocking creators, crying about hate, and scheduling live streams to beg those same viewers for money and validation. The reaction channels aren't obsessed. They're participating. But Amber is possessed, and she knows it. And that's why she's clinging so tightly to this. Because if she's not living rent-free in people's minds, then what is she? Without that, she's just another YouTuber with no control. And that reality is unbearable for a narcissist. This isn't mutual obsession. This is one woman rotting away in an echo chamber and demanding that everyone else lives there too. A hopeless romantic. No, she's not. A hopeless romantic wants love. Amber wants worship. She doesn't want partnership, she wants submission, narrative control, and undying praise. Romance to her is not a mutual dance. It's a stage, and she is always the lead. I'm not going to romanticize what it is in reality. It's obsessive attachment dressed in glitter. She doesn't fall in love. She falls into infatuation traps that she builds herself, and then she weaponizes heartbreak for sympathy when the fantasy collapses under the weight of her demands. She doesn't want connection, she wants possession. A hopeless romantic implies vulnerability. Amber doesn't love people. She absorbs them until they're no longer useful to her. And then some filler fluff, strategically scattered between trauma bait and critic bashing. These light, relatable posts exist solely to soften the mood and break the emotional tempo. It's a classic manipulation tactic. Overload the audience emotionally, then toss them something shallow and sweet to make them feel like things are normal again. But even in her most harmless sounding answers, the narcissism leaks through. She doesn't even engage, she doesn't elaborate, she doesn't describe the scent, no connection, just same. Because it isn't about the perfume. It's about being seen liking what her follower likes. Validation loop complete, moving on. Because even her fragrance picks are completely emotionally transactional. And there's a deeper flaw in this entire emotional calculus. Remember when Chapel Roan was too tainted to bear? A single breakup renders the discography unlistenable forever, but Billie Eilish is magically exempt, still adored, still monetized on cue. What's the difference? It's simple. One serves a narrative, the other doesn't. Chapel Roan was linked to the drama, a tool to amplify heartbreak and victimhood. Billie, on the other hand, offers no such utility. She's a safe, aesthetically pleasing placeholder, convenient to reference and emotionally weightless, so Billie gets to stay. It's got nothing to do with music or memory. It's about which artist best supports the script she's performing in the moment. Because Amber doesn't process emotion. She just curates it. And then here she is again, responding, reacting, and raging. This isn't detachment, it's delusion masquerading as disinterest. If she really didn't care, it wouldn't be answered, framed, or stamped with a performative sigh of superiority. And the real tell is that they can't get views unless they talk about me line. There it is, it's the cornerstone of her crumbling empire. She really believes that she is the oxygen to everyone else's lungs. That her name is the only word that sells. She is the main character in every story, even though she's not even a part of anymore. We also have to pause for the bitter irony of Amberlynn Reid accusing someone else of being money hungry. This is from a woman who uses hospital trips for sympathy, grief for clicks, and now trauma for tears of stream queens. Because this isn't about money, it's about control. And when she doesn't have that, she spits venom and calls it closure. Beck's channel reaching 100,000 so swiftly isn't just success, it's insubordination. To Amber, viewership is loyalty, growth is obedience. And attention? That's a currency only she should be able to print. So when Beck gains a platform, when people listen, empathize, and believe, Amber sees it not as someone rising, but as herself being dethroned. Beck has nearly 100,000 subscribers. In 10 years, Amber has only just double that. It's not just envy, it's narcissistic injury. Because Amber believes she's paid her dues in manipulation, tears, fake breaks, and livestream lies. And Beck is simply existing, speaking honestly and being connected. No filters, no pity bait, just humanity. And to Amber, that's intolerable. And the worst part is that Beck isn't even trying to steal the spotlight. They're just doing what Amber never could. Being honest, being likeable, and being free. Beck's channel isn't rising in spite of Amber. It's rising because people are finally listening to someone else. What a year? More like, what a consequence. She isn't having a bad year. She's having a reckoning. After a decade of manipulation, gaslighting, and casual cruelty, the receipts have caught up, and now she's calling it a bad year as if it's random weather. It's not tragedy, it's accountability. It's a marathon of her own making. She didn't trip into this. She ran full sprint towards it, camera on, filter set, crocodile tears locked and loaded. So no, Amber, it's not what a year. It's what a reputation unravelling in real time. This isn't misfortune. It's maintenance fees on the empire of lies. This is just like the proclamation of a fallen tyrant scorched by a court that dared to revolt. It's not resilience, it's resentment masquerading as strength. A statement that doesn't whisper self-preservation, it shrieks, "I will punish the world for not obeying me." She doesn't want to trust again. She wants to control again. Trust implies vulnerability, compromise. Foreign concepts to Amber, who views connection as a contract where she writes every clause and voids every consequence. It's not a boundary, it's a barricade. And it's one that she's built with her own hands, brick by gaslit brick, because the idea of trusting someone again means relinquishing power. And Amberlynn Reid does not share power. She hoards it, cloaks it in victimhood, and lashes out when it's questioned. Because this isn't heartbreak. It's a fortress. And she'll die in it before she admits that she's the one who locked the gate. The obligatory mental health shaming deflection. It's her favourite shield when the performance gets sloppy. This wasn't a critique of mental illness. She's weaponizing mental health to silence criticism she doesn't like, while simultaneously using it to justify manipulation, inconsistencies, and cruelty. It's not that people don't believe the BPD diagnosis outright. It's that people just don't believe in her. Because it's not about stigma, it's about accountability, and she refuses to see the difference. This is the trademark Amberlynn deflection where she rebrands a performative spiral as a human reaction, as though we've all spent our evenings sobbing into devil horn filters, calling our exes manipulators on Instagram between self-promotional livestream plugs. No one's saying she's not human, but the part that she always conveniently omits is that this human reaction is a result of a pattern that she created and refuses to break. She's not getting thousands of attacks out of nowhere. She's getting consequences for lying, manipulating, and playing the victim after being caught again and again and again. This isn't about mental health, it's accountability, and she's allergic to it. Of course this one's her favourite. It tracks. She sees herself in it, delusionally confident in a moment of dysfunction and deeply amused by something that everyone else probably finds slightly disturbing. In Amber's world, the mother must always be supportive, adoring, and more importantly, concerned for her comfort. Never mind that Amber dragged this woman's name in the dirt for years, used her trauma for sympathy clicks, and crafted an entire victim arc around her upbringing. And now suddenly Mama Lynn is the gentle, tearful cheerleader trying to get a baby girl to touch grass. It's not about her mother, it's about the image. Because invoking maternal concern makes Amber seem more tragic, more soft, and more misunderstood. It's reframing the spiral not as the fallout of her own actions, but as something so heartbreaking that even her mother is sad. It's manipulative, but classic Amber. And there it is, the final form of the defensive cycle. Deflection masquerading as empowerment. She needs these crash outs on camera. She does it strategically. Because without them, she has no narrative to reclaim. No audience to manipulate, no renewed flood of praise to bask in when the tide of criticism rolls out. It's not vulnerability, it's weaponized despair. And when someone genuinely tries to show concern and says, maybe don't put your breakdowns out there for strangers, she snarls. Because concern isn't welcome unless it's blind worship. Anything less, empathy included, is just hate. And frankly, I'm starting to wonder if she even wants the peace. Chaos serves her better. Of course she hasn't, because rage clicks pay the same as loyal ones. Amber's business model relies on public meltdown. She has no incentive to stop the crash outs because she's not losing money. She's profiting off the chaos. Every filtered sob, every eye roll at a reaction channel, every manufactured collapse is just another deposit into her account. She doesn't need a new means of income because she's built a perfectly sustainable ecosystem. Feed the drama, film the fallout, monetize the misery. It's cynical, it's calculated, and worst of all, it actually works. Going through the motions is probably the only honest thing she's said so far, because that's what it is. Motions, it's performances, set pieces for an audience she claims to hate but desperately needs. She doesn't want the resilience, she wants the attention and the validation. She wants to be seen as resilient, not actually be resilient, and that's a big difference. The motions are mechanical, and the spiral is entirely self-scripted. And with that, we've completed another rotation on the Amberlynn Reid cycle, from weeping on the floor to talking about food menus, all in the same breath. A betrayal, a breakdown, Billie Eilish perfume, and now she's your quirky best friend recommending food. It's just theatre. She's not resilient, she's not devastated, she's rehearsed. Of course Alexis just wants revenge, because in Amber's mind, every ex or every critic exists in a constant state of vendetta against her, orbiting her like bitter little satellites. The reality is that most of them probably just want her out of their lives, but that doesn't suit the narcissist narrative, does it? In Amber's world, no one simply moves on. They all linger, consumed by jealousy and lusting after a clout. It's a word she clearly doesn't understand, yet wields it like a toddler with a broadsword. And yes, there are certain characters in this universe that probably have latched onto it just for a bit of that internet fame. But I don't think everyone is doing it like she claims they are. And then this is a classic Amber maneuver. Manipulate your audience into defending you and then pivot to instantly berating someone who didn't leap to your defense with sufficient theatrical flair. Glossed over? No, he chose not to descend into your orchestrated pity parade, and that wounded your ego more than any joke ever could. What she wants isn't justice, it's not accountability, it's grovelling. She wants to see reaction channels beg, not for forgiveness, but for relevance. Because in her mind, she grants it. And when they don't play along, she spirals into tantrums disguised as moral outrage. He's lame because he's not playing into the scene she's writing for the reaction channels. It's petty and it's predictable. No, she says, as though the archives aren't full of her scoffing down takeout and slurring fake apologies between bites. As if she hasn't made tens of thousands of dollars enabling her own destruction on camera. And now she wants a round of applause for doing the bare minimum of not weaponizing food against herself for coins? She only stopped because it stopped paying and YouTube has pulled some of them down anyway. The outrage has dwindled and the views have dipped, so suddenly she's a misunderstood sad girl with aesthetic trauma. Spare me. And then there's the cry of the self-proclaimed villain, if I did it, you'd all hate me. Amber, you did do it. You've mocked, minimized and weaponized mental health illness for years. You've used BPD as both sword and shield, pleading fragility while swinging at anyone who dares challenge the narrative. The issue isn't that people are making fun of BPD meltdowns. The issue is that she stages them, monetizes them, and then screams foul when the audience doesn't applaud. She doesn't want awareness, she wants immunity. She doesn't want empathy, she wants exemption. And worst of all is that she believes she's owed both. And there it is, the final shriek of the crumbling glass house. When all else fails, she breaks out the tactic of hurling ableist like it's confetti at a guilt parade and hoping no one notices the grotesque irony. She can't even show her face? Amber, you mean like you hiding behind filtered Instagram Q&As? Salty Crab chooses anonymity, probably not out of insecurity, but because, unlike you, she's not desperately reliant on the parasocial validation for a paycheck. Salty Crab has the luxury of privacy. You, though, require an audience just to feel real. And while we're on the subject of projections, you accuse others of ableism while gleefully calling people insane, mocking their speech, their looks, their neurodivergence. Your entire channel history is a museum of microaggressions and full-blown tantrums at imagined slights. If Salty Crab were truly ableist, you'd have screenshotted it, re-uploaded it, and named a vlog after it by now. This isn't righteous anger, it's just narcissistic rage. And then yes, the "your favourite isn't perfect" deflection. It's an old trick in the playbook of someone who has nothing left but mud to sling and a mirror she refuses to look into. Amber, you are not the moral compass of YouTube. You don't get to weaponize someone else's alleged personal drama to vindicate your own catastrophically embarrassing behaviour. It reeks of desperation. It's like she's grasping at any straw to redirect the heat off herself, as if someone else's humanity absolves her of her own chronic villain arc. Let's entertain this logic for a moment. Suppose Zachary Michael is flawed. Suppose his ex did need support. And? How does that nullify the 10 years of your documented lies, manipulation, abuse, and performative meltdowns? Even if every reactor turned out to be the Wicked Witch of the West, you'd still be the swamp at the centre of the story. If I may offer one suggestion, rather than scavenging for cracks in other people's lives like a social media vulture, maybe take one long, unflinching look at your own. And then we get the classic "who's really obsessed" defense, an ironic twist considering the only name on repeat in her stories is Zachary Michael. Curious, no? Let's examine this little clapback, shall we? Do I have a YouTube channel that's strictly about him? I think not. No, you just mention him in every tantrum, wedge his name into every spiralling post, and can't go even 48 hours without summoning him like Beetlejuice. You don't need a channel. Your Instagram stories are a shrine built on petty fumes and performative martyrdom. Zachary Michael, meanwhile, uploads videos about your content. It's a distinction you refuse to acknowledge because it shatters the fantasy that you're a persecuted goddess instead of a professional victim. If this were chess, she'd be flipping over the board and screaming about how unfair it is that she can't move her pawns backwards. It's tragic, really. And then the eternal cry of the narcissist when the spotlight burns rather than flatters. If he doesn't like me, why would he base his whole income off me? Because you're not a person to these creators. You're a case study, a spectacle, a cautionary tale wearing cheap Walmart earrings and gaslighting. You're not the sun, no matter how much you think the world orbits around your Dollar Tree chaos. Zachary Michael doesn't base his income off you. He critiques your public content. The difference is he talks about your videos. You talk about him, endlessly, incessantly, with the obsession of a teenager reading their ex's texts. If anything, you should be thanking him. Without channels like his and Salty Crab's, your engagement would be rotting in the same neglected corner as your vlogs. They are your CPR machine, and it's like you want them to kiss you on the forehead as well. This seems like a rare attempt at sincerity, promptly buried beneath 47 passive-aggressive tantrums and half a dozen public lashings aimed at people who just don't like her. It's touching. But bravery isn't the word I would choose. A brave person seeks healing, a narcissist seeks validation. And when the applause stops, Amber just begins screaming. Sharing your BPD journey is not brave when the journey is paved with deflection, blame, and the corpses of friendships you've set on fire for engagement. And then, yes, another carefully curated love letter from the one fan who's still buying what she's selling. She replies as if sheer volume can substitute for validity. A voice is a responsibility, and when your voice is used to gaslight, deflect, and manipulate, what exactly are we celebrating? The audacity? The delusion? Or the fact that you've simply got the stamina that it takes to weaponize victimhood this consistently? And here we are, another entry in Amberlynn's Encyclopedia of Projection, volume 9418. I wouldn't even think 1 second about him, she says, while quite literally thinking about him, writing about him, posting about him, dedicating her Instagram stories to him like a teenage diary entry. This isn't indifference, it's not detachment. This is the behaviour of someone pacing around, pelting boulders in a glass house while shrieking about who's obsessed with whom. And the irony is that if Zachary Michael vanished tomorrow, her content would flatline faster than her accountability. She needs the outrage to survive. It's her final, festering currency. Her single-era announcement had all the theatrical flair of a pop star on the verge of a rebrand, except instead of reinvention, it's just reheated bitterness and defensive Instagram stories. Single and staying there, she declares, as if romantic inaccessibility were a flex rather than the outcome of her just torching every bridge and then posting the ashes with a pout. And let's be honest, if someone shows up in that inbox in the middle of the night, she'll be in love by sunrise. A classic Amberlynn maneuver. Deny reality with all the confidence of a Wikipedia editor with no sources and a grudge. This is a bold statement from someone who weaponizes vulnerability like it's a Twitch donation link. While manipulation is not a requirement of borderline personality disorder, it can manifest as part of the coping strategies, particularly around fear or abandonment. But that nuance doesn't serve her purpose. Instead of owning a behaviour, she's trying to rewrite the rules. But unfortunately for her, this isn't a choose-your-own-diagnosis adventure. If you repeatedly cry on camera to avoid criticism, use illness and identity as shields from accountability, and frame everyone who leaves you or doesn't like you as cruel or ableist, you are, by action if not intent, manipulating. And trying to gaslight, it's just performance at this point. More delusion of superiority served on a platter of projection. This sentence is brought to you by the woman who quite literally stirs the pot, serves it cold, and then cries when others say it doesn't taste good. She says he's 2 steps behind while devoting every square inch of her stories to his name. He's so irrelevant, yet she's threading his name through every response like she's stitching it into a quilt. Here's the real tea. If someone's profiting off your antics and your response is to create more antics, that's not domination, that's supply. You're not outsmarting anyone. You are the content farm feeding the beast you claim to despise. And to say he needs my DMs? That's not a flex. That's a confession. This is exquisite. We've now arrived at the he only ignored me because other people told him to stage. The phase where delusion meets desperation and calls it logic. You just admitted to being ghosted and then promptly told on yourself twice. First by confirming he stopped responding and demolishing the narrative that he's obsessed. And second by suggesting the only reason someone would cease engagement is because someone else told them to, not because they wanted peace, sanity, or an end to your unhinged monologue. You say he can't think for himself, and yet he quite clearly thought when he made the decision to stop replying to you. Curious, isn't it, how the moment he exercises free will and withdraws, he loses all mental autonomy in her eyes? This isn't empowerment, it's a tantrum. Then a good vibes break. The intermission in the opera of delusion where the lead actress is accepting flowers before throwing herself back into the chaos she promises she didn't cause. Observe how the tone softens, the emojis bloom, and the fake gratitude is poured out like syrup. She pivots to thank you not because she means it, but because her narrative requires a reprieve, a moment of fake humility to contrast the volcanic narcissism before and after. This is the eye of the storm, but she acts like it's the sun coming out. And then the philosopher awakens within her, a sudden declaration that sexuality is fluid as though she's gracing us with groundbreaking theories from a Tumblr post in 2014. This isn't a statement born of compassion or progressive understanding. This is more damage control pretending to be enlightenment. This is a woman who's thrown labels like darts, weaponized her sexuality when it's convenient, and now wants to retreat into vagueness. No opinion, really? Her entire brand is opinion, volatile, contradictory, and deeply performative. So try again, Amber. And then she's back in her classic martyrdom, her bread and butter. Observe, if you will, the performance of fragility wrapped in fake humility. I don't know how I cope, I just do. Yes, we know. You cope by passive-aggressively posting about it, baiting sympathy, and blocking dissent like it's cardio. This isn't resilience. It's more rehearsed victimhood from a woman who spent a decade cultivating controversy and clutching her pearls when it delivers consequences. If she truly didn't know how to cope, she wouldn't be live streaming the unravelling. But let's all light a candle for the woman who monetizes every ounce of her chaos and still demands sainthood. And then the next part of the Raglan redemption tour, complete with medical trauma, performative outrage, and just a sprinkling of self-righteous fury. This isn't ableism, it's about her hygiene, full stop. And she's weaponized illness as both shield and sword. She invokes her cancer when it's convenient, and then uses it as a bludgeon to silence critics, even when the critics are responding to terrible behaviours that she herself put online. This isn't advocacy, it's a spin. It's PR wrapped in pity, served with a side of manipulation and garnished with selective memory. Do some deep research. Amber, we have. And the research confirms what the entire internet has already diagnosed from 100 miles away. That your relationship with manipulation isn't a distant theory, it's a default setting. Is manipulation a potential maladaptive behaviour seen in some with BPD? Yes. Does that make it okay? No. But more importantly, in Amber's case, the diagnosis is a red herring. It's a distraction she clings to only when it's convenient, like every other label she's tried on and discarded like last week's Torrid Hall. This is the woman who weaponizes tears when she's backed into a corner, who cries ableism when people clock her contradictions, who gaslights her audience with revisionist timelines, and constructs entire victim narratives where she's never responsible for anything. Manipulation isn't a symptom here, it's a strategy. So thank you, Amber, for your scholarly contribution to psychiatric discourse. Amberlynn saying do some deep research is the comedic peak of her entire persona. This is a woman who confuses a Google search with a medical degree. She skims a Tumblr infographic once and now considers herself an authority in psychiatric nuance. Let's be generous. On principle, telling someone to educate themselves about mental health isn't wrong. It is valid. But when Amberlynn Reid is the one making that demand, it's laughable. She's demonstrated time and again that she doesn't engage with the topics she parades around. She uses mental health as a shield, not a subject of study. She butchers terminology regularly while refusing correction. She treats symptoms like personality traits until they're inconvenient. She leans on selective definitions to excuse behaviour she knows is damaging. This isn't someone who's researched. This is someone who resists accountability under the guise of mental health advocacy. So, no, we're not giving her the credit for standing up against misinformation. Not when she's a walking misinformation campaign with a coupon code for victimhood. She wants to be seen as complex, but what she is transparent. Does this mean we're going into the I like going out and doing things era? Or should we call it the fictional genre Amberlynn conjures when she's trying to cosplay as relatable? Let's observe the paradox. She claims she loves going out and doing things, and yet her vlogs consist of the same locations and environments. She's always just standing around in her apartment. She has the gall to pretend she's a spontaneous adventurer while the last outing was a pilgrimage to nowhere. If doing things included filming herself in a parked car talking about how she's definitely going to start journaling again, then yes, I suppose she's quite active. No one minds a homebody. What they mind is the lie. The constant reinvention of herself depending on the current backlash to sympathy ratio. She's a social butterfly when she wants to deflect, and a trauma-ridden recluse when she wants to dodge criticism. It's all conditional and hollow. She says she likes going out. I say, to where? The fantasy isle of her imagination? This is the eternal paradox of Amberlynn. Leave me alone while I continue to publicly post about the person I claim is obsessed with me. We can't overlook the performance here. She blocked him and then proceeds to obsessively mention him across multiple stories while answering follower prompts exclusively all about him. Also, she could curate this narrative of persecution. This isn't leave me alone energy. This is I need a nemesis to stay relevant energy. She wants silence, but only on his end. She wants distance, but only when she gets to measure it. And she wants privacy, but through a megaphone with the stage lights on and the curtain never closed. If it truly were weird energy, she'd just disengage. But as we know, chaos is her currency. And right now she's running a full-scale pity economy. Her therapist trump card. She's literally seeing a specialist. It's Amberlynn's go-to sledgehammer when she's cornered, as if the mere act of attending therapy is a substitute for self-awareness or growth. Showing up to an appointment isn't the same as participating in recovery. You can sit in a therapist's office for years and never dismantle a single one of your delusions, especially if you're treating the therapy as a performance stage instead of a place of accountability. What she means is, someone with credentials tolerated me for an hour, so that must mean I'm correct. But narcissists often weaponize therapy. They use it as a shield, not as a mirror. And if this alleged BPD specialist is real, I pity them deeply. That poor soul is probably just nodding politely while Amber's spinning another tale about how the world has wronged her. The crown emoji, the universal symbol of someone who believes delusion is a personality trait. What Amberlynn willfully refuses to understand is that infamy is not the same as influence. Yes, Amber, your name provides a revenue stream, but not out of admiration. People aren't building channels around you because they see you as a queen. They're building them because they see a cautionary tale. They see a masterclass in what happens when ego metastasizes unchecked. She thinks she's the main character, but she's actually just the moral of the story. It's not iconic to be profitable only in the context of criticism. That's not legacy. People aren't watching you because of your charisma, Amberlynn. They're watching you because the spiral is reliable. Your downfall is scheduled content, and your mediocrity is predictable profit. And that's not the flex you think it is. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is an iconic celebration of outrageousness, daring costumes, and unapologetic self-expression. To think of Amberlynn Reid among the cult followers of this wild and liberating thing, it's like a mismatch of epic proportions. Can you imagine her trying to engage in the audience participation, struggling to muster the energy to throw things while barely keeping herself upright and complaining about the uncomfortable seating while others scream with passion? And then she's sluggishly moving through the motions. It'd just be like a dark cloud hovering over the sheer exuberance of everything else, and she'd suck the life out of everything in the room. She'd just be sulking in the back, wondering why the audience is so enthusiastic and why she can't seem to muster even a fraction of that joy. But it would be on brand for someone who always makes everything about themselves, even when it doesn't fit the occasion. All things considered, the Rocky Horror Picture Show would be a glaring reminder of how someone who craves attention can suffocate an atmosphere by not understanding how to let go and enjoy it. How gracious of her. That's the level of maturity I expect. Admitting when she's wrong, if only to minimise the damage to her reputation. But, of course, it's always with a passive-aggressive thanks for clarifying, as if she's doing everyone a favour just by acknowledging the error. It's telling how she only apologises when she's caught, and even then it's a half-hearted effort. A simple, "oh, my mistake," probably would have sufficed, but of course she had to add that little flourish to maintain the narrative that she's above it all. I wouldn't even take the apology seriously. I wouldn't be surprised if the next moment she's going back to assuming things about people or trying to cover up her blunders with more of a classic Amberlynn charm. How original, how heartfelt. It's almost like she's trying to toss a compliment right back without even acknowledging the original one. "So are you." It's just such a safe, generic answer. There's no substance, it's just a half-hearted echo. And then her classic deflection technique. Is this the best response you've got? I mean, yeah, you could have just taken the advice and gone to bed and stopped all this. But no. Let's turn it into a remark about how everyone is in the same miserable nocturnal state. And then we toss around the idea that maybe she is a narcissist. Because, after all, it's all about self-awareness, right? It's not as if we haven't heard all this before. Her constant need to validate her behaviour, to grasp at labels in an attempt to control the narrative. It's exhausting. The real issue isn't whether she has narcissistic traits, which, spoiler, she does. It's that she seems to constantly minimise or deflect from the underlying reasons for her actions, as if wearing the BPD tag somehow absolves her of responsibility. And then she mentions the DBT as some sort of shiny new saviour. It's almost like she's only invested because it's the latest trend, and not because she wants to actually make progress. The idea of fixing herself is more about maintaining the narrative where the problem always lies just outside her control. This isn't the revelation we need, Amber. This is just more of the same dance. Acknowledge the problem, but keep it at arm's length. And at the end of the day, as much as she wants to convince us that multiple professionals have ruled out narcissism, it's not the label that matters. It's the behaviour. and she's already showed the entire world exactly what her behaviour looks like. We're supposed to believe that because she grew up in chaos, she's immune to the effects of it now? That it somehow gives her the upper hand? No, it just means you've learned how to exist in a constant state of turmoil, and that's not something to be proud of. It's almost as if she uses this calm persona as a mask to cover up the fact that she thrives in this drama. If she were truly as calm as she claims, she wouldn't keep dragging herself into the same predictable mess over and over. We can clearly see she's not calm. She's numb. She's learned to become numb to everything around her, because that's the only way to deal with the constant storm of chaos she's created. It's not calmness, it's avoidance, pure and simple. She can keep telling herself that she's better than the drama, but the truth is she's been wading in it for years. She may think it's the only thing she knows, but it's not normal. It's a pattern that needs to be broken, not perpetuated. She's always digging into her childhood trauma as if it's some kind of get-out-of-jail-free card. Every time she faces criticism, out comes the sob story. My childhood was so terrible. Well, guess what? Everyone has a backstory, but not everyone uses theirs as an excuse to avoid accountability. It's a well-worn script at this point. She's so quick to lean into the victim narrative and use it as a convenient explanation for why she's incapable of growing. It's not about wanting sympathy anymore. It's about manipulating the narrative to absolve herself from real work. She's learned to use her past as a crutch to avoid facing any real introspection or responsibility. Yes, Amberlynn, your childhood wasn't ideal, we know that, and we do sympathise. But that doesn't mean you get a lifetime pass to continue repeating destructive behaviours. It's tiresome. The constant appeal to sympathy doesn't excuse present behaviour. We all have struggles, but it's how we grow from them that matters. And she's not doing the work needed to evolve. She just stays stuck, replaying the same narrative over and over for sympathy and validation. She blocks negativity? Convenient. So if someone asks a question that doesn't stroke her ego or paint her in the perfect light, they're automatically negative and worthy of a block. Blocking negativity just happens to coincide with blocking any form of criticism. Well, it's quite a coincidence. It's not about negativity, it's about facing uncomfortable truths. But I suppose it's easier to shut down the conversation than engage with it, especially when it challenges that carefully curated image. It's all part of that narcissistic tendency to filter out anything that doesn't fit the story she's created for herself. If you're only blocking the people who ask tough questions or give constructive criticism, that's not negative. It's an opportunity for self-reflection, and that's something that clearly isn't on her agenda. She'd rather continue living in her bubble of validation, unbothered by the consequences of her actions. Such maturity. What's truly wild here is the way she brushes off genuine criticism in favour of maintaining her narrative. She's trying to portray herself as some misunderstood, perfect victim of online armchair psychologists. I'm sure it must be genuinely hard and upsetting when thousands of people online are diagnosing you with something without actually ever really getting to know you. But when there are 10 years of documented behaviours, you can't really argue against it. You'd think for the one comment that seems to actually be on her side, she'd have more to say about it. She's so deeply invested in an image of herself as this misunderstood victim that she has to fake confusion and hope that maybe it's her audience that will start to question it too. The nostalgic I miss them, it's classic. She's all about the idea of aesthetic, the memory, the drama, but when it comes to the thought of putting in effort or feeling discomfort, she retreats with that quick "it hurt too bad." It's a perfect metaphor for how she approaches life. She'll tell you about the things she misses, things she once did, but when it comes to making changes or following through with them, the excuses flow faster than the sentimentalism. I miss my piercings, but it hurt too much. It's a statement that could easily be applied to a lot of the things she wants to change, but never follows through on. Effort? Oh, that's too painful. And then, here it is, the cancer card in full play. She's trotting it out once again, not for the sake of awareness, but to reinforce the narrative that she's been victimized. She loves to pull out the fact that people questioned her cancer diagnosis when things get tough. It's her ultimate sympathy shield. just like the BPD deflection. It makes anyone who challenges her look heartless. It's a flawless manipulation tactic, really. Bring out the tragedy so no one can say anything cynical without looking like they're attacking someone who's been through hell. But the issue is, she's used this cancer card repeatedly, and instead of using it to raise awareness or reflect on her experience, it's just a weapon to silence critics and dodge accountability. It's not even about the cancer. It's about playing the victim so that anyone who calls her out looks like a villain. The irony of this response. She's so entrenched in her own obsession with being the centre of attention that she's completely blind to the fact that she is the one providing the material. Journalists do cover celebrities, yes, but the celebrities don't literally post their entire lives for consumption every day, every minute. Amberlynn is the one choosing to overshare every aspect of her existence, begging for coverage, and then acting like a victim when she gets it. You are not a celebrity, Amberlynn. You're an influencer, a minor influencer, who can't stop self-sabotaging for engagement. You post your every move, every meal, and every mood for attention, and then you're surprised when the attention turns into criticism? It's not about journalism. This is about you being a content machine, harvesting drama, feeding the cycle of obsession, and then claiming it's all out of your control. You're the one posting. You are the one fueling it. And then you play the victim when people take an interest. This is quite the metaphor, isn't it? All the things Amber could do, whether it's taking responsibility for her actions, putting in the work, or even getting a piercing, it gets sidelined the moment they require any actual effort, because it's all about the easy way out. She'll say she wants something, but she's allergic to any inconvenience that might come with it. It's a recurring theme. This is a passive-aggressive response designed to provoke more attention without taking any responsibility or offering any clarity. By leaving this here, she's effectively sidestepping addressing the allegations or providing any meaningful input, while also keeping the conversation about her. Again. It's telling that she chooses to avoid engaging with the content of the comment and instead focuses on the vileness of someone else's words, while completely glossing over her own history of inflammatory statements and drama farming. She can't engage with the criticism, so she deflects. She turns the focus on someone else's comments in an attempt to paint herself as the innocent victim of vile commentary. It's a classic narcissistic maneuver. When you can't respond with substance, throw a grenade and retreat. This is such a convenient way to paint herself as someone who feels deeply, yet never backs it up. The songs are moody, popular, and edgy, but they're also low-effort selections that require no vulnerability beyond repeating lyrics. It's interesting that she chooses only songs that reflect emotional turmoil. It's fitting for someone whose personality is more about presenting mood than actually expressing depth. What her response here conveniently ignores is the very reason why reaction channels hide their faces. It's about maintaining privacy and boundaries, not trying to control or manipulate the narrative like she does. While reaction channels may choose to remain anonymous to protect their own peace or maintain some level of separation from the chaos, Amberlynn throws herself into the spotlight at every opportunity, only to turn around and act surprised when the drama follows her. If privacy mattered to her, she'd stop oversharing every detail of her life for views, but instead she plays the victim when the backlash comes. So it's not that she doesn't care about her digital footprint, it's that she only cares when the consequences are inconvenient. A classic I'm just human excuse. It's a neat little package, isn't it? It absolves her from accountability while allowing her to play the I'm just like you card. But here's the thing, Amber. Being human doesn't mean you get to bypass responsibility. Everyone makes mistakes. All of us. But when you're on a public platform, especially when you monetize, you don't get to do whatever you want and then use being human as a free pass. You don't get to dismiss criticism with a "we all make mistakes" while simultaneously acting like your actions are above reproach when they harm other people. If Amberlynn truly accepted that she doesn't agree with her own actions, maybe we'd actually see change instead of using them to fuel drama and monetize pity. But that would require self-awareness, which, well, we all know how well that's been going. This statement is a great example of her trying to disarm criticism with a little bit of fake vulnerability, without actually addressing the patterns of her toxic behaviour that people are calling out. A quick response, straight to the point, and yet oddly disingenuous. It's almost like Amberlynn wanted to make sure she didn't come off as too indulgent, as if drinking an energy drink could somehow tarnish her carefully cultivated image of wellness and self-control. And let's not forget, this is the same person who'd have an all-you-can-eat buffet for breakfast. Energy drinks? Too much. The perfect mix of deflection and a side of fake moral superiority. Mental health shaming? Really? Amberlynn, you, the person who's weaponized mental health and used it as a shield to deflect from actual accountability? It's not mental health shaming to point out toxic behaviours. People can call out narcissistic traits without belittling someone's mental health. And you, Amberlynn, are a textbook case of narcissistic behaviour, whether you want to admit it or not. You can't just slap a stop mental health shaming sticker on every criticism that makes you uncomfortable and expect it to stick. This isn't about shaming. It's about recognising patterns of behaviour that have been repeatedly demonstrated in your content. But instead of accepting any sort of critique, she immediately cloaks herself in the "I'm being victimised because of my diagnosis" excuse. This is the classic "I'm right and anyone who agrees with me is also right" mentality. She loves to create divisions. She's all for the "we're all in this together" rhetoric, as long as it benefits her. The truth is she's actively trying to dictate how others should engage with her drama. This isn't about integrity and more about control. She wants people to take sides in a little feud playground, forcing reactors into a box where they either defend her or get labelled as having no integrity. It's also fascinating how she accuses other reactors of lacking integrity, when she herself constantly avoids taking responsibility, twisting narratives and pretending to be above the drama she creates. Amberlynn Reid has earned every bit of backlash that she gets, not from the occasional snark or offhanded comment, but from years of manipulative behaviour, blatant hypocrisy, and a constant cycle of drama that she stirs up herself. The difference here is that Salty Crab, for all the shade she's thrown, isn't the one creating the drama, she's just responding to it. Amber's behaviour is a constant series of missteps, half apologies, deflections and contradictions. She has built this empire of chaos with her own hands, and now she's crying foul when someone else turned the tables. It's true, if Amber were to give someone a nickname, the outrage would be off the charts. But that's because she spent 10 years earning that hatred. No amount of cute filters or victim statements are going to change it. As for the morals argument, it's laughable coming from someone who regularly disregards ethical standards for the sake of good YouTube moments or sympathy boosts. It just boils down to this. Amber created the monster, and now she's crying because it started to bite back. A diagnosis is not something you self-identify with because it fits your narrative or explains your actions. It's something you get professionally evaluated for. Amber's sudden declaration of a BPD diagnosis is just another example of her leaning on mental health as a convenient excuse, without any real evidence to back it up. Sure, she may have seen a therapist or a doctor, but until she's willing to show proof of a legitimate professional diagnosis, her claims are just as flimsy as everything else she said. It's become a crutch, a way to avoid taking accountability for her actions by attributing them to a diagnosis. But mental health conditions don't give you a free pass to be rude, dismissive, and manipulative. Until she can back up these claims with actual evidence, it's just another excuse she's using to deflect criticism and reinforce her victim complex. It's just another shield she's hiding behind. A nice, safe response. Just a hint of gratitude to make her seem appreciative without diving any deeper. What's fascinating here is how quickly she accepts the validation about growth, yet avoids discussing the real work required for growth. Yes, growth is non-linear, but Amberlynn rarely demonstrates any active effort or accountability needed for meaningful change. It's not enough to say you're growing without showing any tangible steps or effort. Just because she's accepted a diagnosis doesn't mean she's automatically on a path to self-improvement. She'll happily take the compliment, but there's no real discussion of what she's actually doing to address the behaviours. She won't talk about the work it takes to manage a condition, because real growth requires facing uncomfortable truths, And we all know that she prefers to play the victim over taking responsibility. It's a nice, neat package of empty gratitude with no follow-through. The nothing you do will ever be enough excuse. She really is trying to play the martyr here. It's the ultimate victim complex move, suggesting that no matter how much she does, how right she is, the world will always conspire to discredit her. This is a person who genuinely believes that any critique of her behaviour, no matter how valid, is just more manipulation from others. It's never her fault, it's always someone else who can't handle her truth. What's even more amusing is that by making this comparison, she's elevating herself to the level of infallibility. It's textbook narcissism. She makes herself the centre of the universe, and everyone else the enemy who's wrong for simply existing. She's choosing to engage with questions that allow her to further the narrative of the tragic, misunderstood soul with the complicated, painful past. She's not just answering these questions, she's selecting them to feed the drama and craft an image that aligns with what she wants to portray. The cancer discussion isn't about educating, it's not about raising awareness. It's deflection. By going back to the cancer, she turns the focus away from any critical conversation and back to the victimhood. It's an attempt to control the narrative again and deflect from the fact that she's not engaging with the question in any meaningful way. She just pulls out the cancer card when it serves her to shift the focus and paint herself as a martyr. But again, she picks and chooses the drama she wants to perpetuate. By responding to this question, she gets to play up the poor me story and continues to perform the tragic image, and she's using the cancer diagnosis as another layer of her manufactured sympathy. It's a calculated move, not an accidental one. The question was just an opportunity to continue her narrative. And she ends with her poor me narrative in full swing. Her ability to frame herself as the victim despite her behaviour being a direct cause of the chaos is impressive. All of this is a direct reflection of her own actions. She is the one sharing her most vulnerable moments with the world, and she is the one fueling the constant cycle of drama. And when the backlash comes, it's poor me, they're invalidating me. The phrase, "no wonder I become unhinged," is classic deflection. Rather than acknowledge that her own actions may contribute to the perception others have of her, she flips it into this passive-aggressive cry for empathy. And instead of genuinely reflecting on her behaviour, she just spins it into a justification for every tantrum and every emotional outburst. It's not my fault I'm unhinged, the world made me this way. She could take responsibility for her actions. She could engage in real introspection. But that would require facing uncomfortable truths. And why do that when she can get sympathy by framing herself as a misunderstood soul who just can't catch a break? That was quite a ride. From deflections to tantrums, selective victimhood and perfectly timed sympathy grabs, she's given us another front row seat to the grand performance. Every answer's carefully curated to fit her narrative, and any opportunity for introspection swiftly dodged. It's like watching a play with a script that's so obvious it's painful. 66 questions, 66 opportunities to take accountability, but instead it's just 66 more ways to avoid it. Her growth is like a roller coaster at this point, and we're just strapped in for the ride. It's funny, isn't it? She loves to claim that all reaction channels are obsessed with her, when in reality, as soon as I'm done with this video, I've got real things to do. The sun is actually shining, I've got art projects to tackle, and real meaningful connections to focus on. This video about Amber is just one part of my day, and I'll probably forget all about her until tomorrow's video. It's not the reaction channels that are glued to their phones waiting for the next scrap of attention. It's Amber who's sitting there, refreshing, waiting for validation from strangers. She wants to believe that reaction channels have nothing else to do but obsess over her. But it's just deflection, plain and simple. She's projecting her own fixation onto others because deep down, she's the one whose life revolves around the drama. And when you can't handle that, the best thing to do is obviously just point the finger and scream, "Obsessed with me!"